Hey everyone, my name is Joe Cronin. I'm here today from Patriot Real Estate, and I'm going to teach you about how you can search for real estate deeds in the state of Massachusetts. So, you may be doing this for different reasons. You may be a current owner, or you may be someone that's interested in a property. But for whatever the reason, I'm going to walk you through the same steps you're going to use. Really, it's going to start with identifying the property that you want to use. There's multiple ways to do these searches, but I'm going to show you how to do it based on the property address. So I have a property address in mind, so I'm going to start by identifying the proper district that the property resides in. There's different ways you can do this. You can Google for the city that you want to find. So if we're looking for North Andover, we can find the county that it resides in, which is Essex County. But unfortunately, that doesn't tell us everything we need to know because, as you'll see in this map, there's North Essex and South Essex. So there's another way to do it that's outside of just trial and error, and that is by going to this map. This map actually lays out exactly which town falls within each different district. So this is one way, but in our case, I happen to know that the property that we're looking for resides in North Essex. So you have two options. You can actually click on the map, or you can click in this list. So let's just use the list. We'll click North Essex, and then we'll hit go. All right, so one quick note is that each of these different counties has its own different registry website. So it's going to look different depending on the county that the property resides in. But in this case, this is the Northern Essex Registry of Deeds site. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to search for the property using the address as we formally mentioned. So you're going to click on this search by name or address, and that's going to bring up a new screen. All right, so once we're in here, you're going to actually click on address partial, and that's going to bring up a new tab. And in here, you can type in your property address. So one pro tip that I'm going to pass to you is that, and I'm going to show you both ways, but so the property we're looking for is 81 Beverly Street. And I'm going to show you that the problem that we have is that if we use street, if we use the full address name, that can create problems. So you want to do that. You want to enter in your town, assuming you know it, and we do in this time. And we're doing this based on looking for a deed, which is going to show the title to the property. So we're going to go to the document types and we're going to search for deed. As you can see, this is a pretty expansive list, but we know what we're looking for. So if we do it based on this search criteria, we're going to run into a problem. So we're going to hit search records, and it's going to say that they can't find anything. So we're going to modify our search. And so the pro tip that I was mentioning is you oftentimes don't want to put in street. You want to use the abbreviation ST, and just make sure you limit it that way, because, or you can even take out street, because sometimes if it doesn't meet the exact specifications for the way that it's registered in the registry, then you're going to pull up no results. So you want to sort of keep it open so that you can capture the proper thing. And what we often find is that if you use the abbreviation ST, then you're going to be fine. That's the way that it's going to be shown in the records. So we're going to modify the search. We're going to click this again, and this should pull up the results that we expect. And it did. So as we can see here now, we've got results. We only have one result for this particular property. So for Massachusetts and for this particular registry of deeds, what we want to do next is we want to actually take a look at this deed. So we can see here, just to kind of walk you through some of the information on screen, you got the book and page, you have the recording timestamp, we have the number of pages in this document, its grouping. Again, it's yielding this type of document, which is the deed. This shows the consideration, which we'll talk about next, and then this is the reference to the website and to its database. This is the town where the property resides, and this is the address. We also see the grantor and grantee. We'll talk about that next, but I just wanted you to kind of understand what you're looking at. So if we want to look at the actual document, the next thing we want to do is we want to click on this little book icon, and that's going to actually bring up the document. And so here, once this screen loads, you can look at it in different views, but I typically like to look at the entire document in totality. So in order to do that, I would click on the View Image Online, the All Pages option, and this is going to pull up the entire document. So I'm going to walk you through exactly what you see on screen here. But at the top, you see this book and page. This is important. If you haven't thought about this before in this context, it's actually a great idea to write this down. This information is actually going to be a shortcut in case you ever want to go back to the registry and pull up this deed again. Obviously, once you have it up on screen, you could save a copy, but if you needed to show someone else later on, what you could do is write this down, and this with this information you can actually do your search criteria and go to this document much quicker. But we'll move on. We'll talk about some of the other things you see on screen here. So you're going to see the date. So this 3/7/2012 was the date that this was actually recorded, and then this shows the time, 3:48 p.m. This shows the excise tax information, shows the registry where this occurred. The date that we see is the same. Um, some of the other information here isn't as relevant, so we're not going to worry about it at this time. We're going to keep going on. What we see at the top here is that it's a condominium, so that's the type of property that this refers to, and it's a unit deed. So condo unit is part of a bigger complex. Here at the top, I'm going to just sort of walk you through the different sections of the deed so you sort of know what you're looking at. So at the top, we call this the grantor section. It starts here where it says Jeffco Inc., and it's going to go all the way down to where it lists the property address of the current owner. So what we see here is Jeffco Inc., which is the grantor. So this is the person or the legal entity that is actually the current owner of the property. That's the one that's selling the property. So here, Jeffco Inc., a Massachusetts corporation of P.O. Box 802, Andover, Essex County, Massachusetts. This was the seller. Next, we see the for consideration paid and in full consideration of, and then it shows the amount. So what this is showing you here is the actual amount that the property was sold for. And then here we see grants to this individual. This is the person that is also known as the grantee, so that's your buyer. And then this just shows the address of the grantee. So that was, in this instance, that happened to be the address that was used as the purchase address. So it was listed, so that can be a little bit confusing, but I just wanted to point that out. So even though it shows this as the address, this person wasn't the owner prior to the sale. So you'll often see that. Another thing that's a hallmark of deeds in Massachusetts is you see the property address listed in the margin. So it shows the 81 Beverly Street, Unit 1, North Andover, Mass. Something that I think is important to point out, and it's not obvious, at least in my opinion, is that you see this Unit 1 here, but you don't see it listed here. And you see maybe a different listing of it in a later point in the document. So that's not uncommon, but it can be confusing. So it's just something to keep in mind, but it's not something that you should worry about. All right, so we've covered our grantor section. We have the grantor, we have the grantee, the grantor again being the seller, the grantee being the buyer. We have the consideration, which is the sales price. And down here we have the type of deed this is. So in Massachusetts, what you often see is that the deed being used is what's called quitclaim. And a quitclaim deed is something that conveys it's a legal instrument that conveys title to property. This type of deed contains no warranties of title, so that's important. It's different depending on the state that you live in, and there's different types of protections that flow from this type. But again, with the quitclaim covenant, it's basically saying that what is shown in the legal description is exactly what the seller intends to convey. So there's no additional warranties or promises of protection that extends beyond that which the seller is showing. So We'll move on, and I just want to point out that this next section, where it starts with Unit 1, this is getting into what's called the legal description. And it's really important to read this and to go through this in detail. This is going to lay out a number of different things. It may lay out how the property was originally discussed and drafted, as well as created. It'll also show things like your easements and encumbrances, if there are any. So it's important to read through those. And again, it's gonna be different depending on the property that's being looked at. But you always want to look for those. You also want to do the same type of research when you're going back through what's called the chain of title. So in this case, when we did our search, only one deed came up. And that tells us something that's important, which is that this was the only deed, so that means there was only one owner in this chain of title. But there may, with other properties, be multiple owners if you go back through the chain of title. And what you want to do when you're going back and looking at older deeds is you want to compare the legal description to ensure that you see the proper information documented at each stage of the process. And it can change with time, especially with things like easements, but you want to make sure that nothing is being missed. There might be information that wasn't documented in the deed that should have been, and that could be an error and omission on the part of the person that's drafting the deed. So you really want to take a look at that. Finally, the things you want to look for are to ensure that there was proper signatures by the party that's selling. So your grantor, you want to make sure that they've signed it. As we see here, we see the two different signatures. You also want to look at your notary and make sure that you have proper notarized document. You want to look for things like the date that it was documented and the person that was giving the notary to ensure that their commission hadn't expired. But those are the basic things that you want to look for. And this type of research can be done in different ways, but for the purpose of today, I wanted to show you the basic mechanics of the deed and how to find it using the property search method.